my influences at that time and all the artists that I was really like ogling were African American painters, you know, and I really loved their sense of how they portray community and what force, you know. But I've had family throughout being like, oh, but all of us aren't the skin, you know, like it's. But I feel like the reason for the cropping at the waist and skin tone, etc., and the flatness of the figure is that I don't want to pick up and have you identify with each individual, you know, and separate one from the other. It's me really amassing one section of society and saying, look at this, right? This series of mine is titled Brothers, Fathers and Uncles. It was actually born well before the Kochi Biennale, where everyone seemed to have become better acquainted with the work. But basically in 2016, I'd moved from Abu Dhabi to Melbourne, Australia, and the previous body of work wouldn't have carried as well as I think I was done with that. And so as I was trying to look for inspiration, connect with the city, etc., it was a bit of a struggle. And what I ended up referring to was actually my sense of home, my sense of identity, and what it meant to me. And as I was sort of going through that process is when what stood out as most jarring was this notion of patriarchy and how do I articulate it. And the visual came quite instantly. It was just this, it was meant as an illustration initially, but it was just men gathered wearing the munda. My discomfort with the munda in itself, you know, of my notions of it being some form of posturing and kind of like whitewashing some sort of cultural issues or whatnot. And so the visual was quite stark, but then it was this whole thing of how do I actually now execute it, right? So I wasn't an illustrator. The visual was illustration, but when I first tackled the work, which we have over here. So this was the first work. It started in 2016 and I wrapped it up only by 2018. So it started out multicolored and then me trying to achieve translucency upon that with acrylic without the right techniques. So I was initially slathering paint, then wiping it off, then eventually I hit it with sandpaper. And that's how this texture and grain came across in the work. And I really enjoyed it. And then over the next few years, I continued just out of curiosity of how to, one, formalizing steps in a manner or being able to control the process. And from then till now, it has changed quite a bit. But here there's a lot, this background color, for example, has changed at least 4 times. Yeah. You know, but because it's sanded down and really thin coats of paint and it being acrylic and opaque, all of that is kind of removed. As for why there isn't much happening in the background is because I think the most immediate association often with Kerala and settings is green, lush, vibrant, you know, nature. And I felt like this was more of a critique that I was trying to make, and I wasn't trying to celebrate that richness in a way. And what I was actually drawing upon was how Kerala, being a tropical state, is just really tired, weathered, and worn, you know? So basically peeling paint and rain-streaked, etc. I wanted to try and capture those textures and surfaces. And I felt this whole sanding process and the blotchy way in which I would treat my background kind of mimicked that sort of like stone, concrete sort of feel. So process has shifted a lot from then to here. It has formalized and I've gotten sucked into technical detail more than I was before. Like in the previous painting, the flowers were literally just outlines. Versus now I've just gotten so realistic, I don't know why and what I'm doing it for, but I'm compelled to. So basically, technique-wise, I layer about 4 coats of undiluted raw umber, right, as the background coat. And then I go in with about 4 to 6 coats of really diluted acrylic paint that I sort of some form of blotting on it to create this organic texture running through the work. Then I sand the entire work with sandpaper and I tape up these 3 fingers just to protect them and sand it, which sort of actually brings the tone down by like a degree, right? And then I go on, draw my figures, which I completely composed them before because the entire process becomes reductive. I don't really have room for edits or corrections. And so I basically draw on my figures and then I go at the munda And so up until last year, February, I was doing all of the sanding by hand. I would cut little tabs of sandpaper, again like 3 fingers instead of 2 today, but 3 fingers taped up, and then literally just keep sanding and then kind of work my way down the paper. But it's literally the amount of pressure I apply. The more pressure I'm applying, or the more I'm sanding, I'm returning to the original primed canvas, which is through those 10 or so coats of paint. And so the less I sand is where the shadows form, and the more I sand is where the highlights form. And so then this is a very weird or arduous process, but has yielded an interesting technique, but also it's just so process oriented. And meditative or immersive. And so a work like this takes me about 2 to 3 months, right, in just sanding. And in a day, I might cover this much area on a good day, and that's working kind of long hours, as well as roughly 7 days a week. And once I get past this is where it becomes a bit more a different form of joyous, where I'm executing the flowers or the limbs. The limbs, again, is like 4 more coats of paint, and the flowers come in, then the artifacts in their hands, and then the shirts is the most stressful part because I'm terrible with color. So trying to figure out this sort of layout of color and placement is actually my most stressful part of the painting, and then again more detailing of just.
This isn't done, right?
This is not done. This is an incomplete work.
Yeah.
One, I want to talk about patriarchy, and I want to talk about it from a reference point that was familiar to me, or what my relationship to it was. I don't mean it only exists here, etc., right? But the works are meant to be situated in Kerala, hence the selection of using the mundus throughout the works. But then I also wanted to try and document that this occupation of space, or entitlement to space, was something that has been occurring for years and for years to come. I kind of wanted it to sit in this manner that it wasn't a stagnant, it wasn't a snapshot, right? And so I've added flowers actually in reference to vanitas, right? But basically the notion of wilting, time is passing, the capturing of time is supposed to happen with the flowers. So it's these men gathered in spaces. The flowers have fallen and collected around their feet. Some are still fresh, some are wilting, and that's the sole purpose of the flowers. Some people have referred to it as, oh, the women in the frame. And I'm like, oh my God, no. But I wouldn't reduce them to flowers at their feet. But the entire point of the work is the absence of women in every frame, and how starkly that is felt or not, and why. So for example, this is how my compositions sort of start out. A selection of figures that I then pick and choose based on their angles to each other, and whether it seems like a natural gathering, and their body language, how it interacts. So all of this is completely, it's almost like playing with dolls, at autonomy over how they interact with each other. And also the choices of a folded mundo versus in midst of draping, or fully open. So this is where it started, with these boys modeling for me. I initially started off with cutting them out, then trying to place them together and make it physically. And it's over time that I started doing it digitally, because I realized scaling was an issue when I was printing out or zooming in and taking pictures. It was a big mess. And then this is how I make an entire composition before I actually embark on a painting, because as I said, being reductive, there's no room to correct for any mistakes, truly. This was my shoebox of a studio in Melbourne. Again, the process was different to what I do now, where again, white paint was applied and then I'm removing paint. But also, a lot has changed with the moving of the work from Melbourne to Bangalore by my medium itself. I haven't been able to achieve the same whiteness, just because of like not being able to access the same canvas or gesso, etc. I haven't figured out how or why, but I feel like it's actually lent to the work. The work has slowly evolved just based on materials and accessibility. And this is the work that I said I had done for Logamita Ravada, where he said, do a solo. So I try to make as large a work as possible, and I try to make a large composition that would cut up into panels, where each panel was its own composition in itself. And while doing that, I suddenly had an error in this section. On panel 3, there was a problem with it. I'll just bring it over. Yeah, I don't know what happened with this work, but I just couldn't. It was so muddy, and I just couldn't clean it up. And so I, weeks before the exhibitions, cut this panel off. And when I cut this off, I was able to somehow reattach that composition, and it still somehow worked. Yeah. So without this guy on the end here, I moved this guy over here, and somehow it became one, and this became an individual piece, which was the other part of this canvas over here. Yeah, and then, so this is the whiteness of earlier, and how I document flowers as well. I remove it from its natural setting, create a more sterile setting for me to get it at the vantage point I want without the debris that is more distracting for when I paint. These are earlier works. This is one composition where it was not me placing every single figure like I have done in every other painting, but this was at a political rally in Trivandrum, which is one of the best grounds situations for me to get a lot of images, as well as like outside temples and things like that, any sort of gathering. The choice initially just started off with nostalgia, of the jasmine and of people traversing a space. But after a while, it became, the next choice was Kannikonna, being like Vishu, and this notion of prosperity, and just significant within the family, etc. And then it's become more about curiosity as well, of what I've added in here and there, and how that lends meaning to the work. So this one with the banana flower at the time was my intrigue to actually paint it itself. But someone's interpretation of it was, there's this term in Malayalam which means to snub someone, like to poke someone with a banana flower, to put them down in a way. And another reference I was told to me was these nectar pods has another saying, I guess, where to cut down a banana flower just to suck the nectar from the pods is such a travesty for such a fleeting pleasure, which kind of points to other things in life. But yeah, so I think it's, I really enjoy how these elements kind of add more to the work as well.